Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So, if you're listening to this in real time, it's the week after the 4th of July, and the 4th of July is my second favorite holiday. My favorite holiday is Thanksgiving, and one of the things that I love about the 4th of July, well, there's many things I love about the 4th of July, the fireworks and the food and celebrating our country's independence and things of that nature, but there's a thing that happens at Walmart or maybe at other stores the day after the 4th of July that I'm not a big fan of, and that is that usually, at least at my Walmart, that the seasonal section that, at Christmas it has Christmas stuff, at Halloween it has Halloween stuff, at, in the early summer it has all the different things you need for summer, beach towels and all the things. But at my Walmart, the day after the 4th of July, they put out all the back-to-school stuff. And there have been times where I will actually take a different route through the store just so I can avoid that in early July because I don't want to see that just yet. And I coach leaders, private school leaders all over the United States, and what amazes me is how different everyone's school calendars are depending on where you are in the country. And so some of my clients in schools in Louisiana and Georgia and Arkansas, their last day of school was around May 15th to the 20th, right in there. And some schools in New York, New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, their last day wasn't until around June 15th to the 20th, a whole month later. Well, what that means then is the schools that ended early, that their back-to-school teacher in service at the end of the summer is boom, all of a sudden it's on top of you. And several of my clients, their teachers returned the first Monday in August. And I just spoke to one the other day that has the earliest date that I've ever heard. Their teachers return on July 14th. And so you might be wondering, why is Mark coming at me with an episode about teacher in service right after the 4th of July? Well, it's because in some places in the country, their in-service is only a few weeks away. And on this podcast, we're focused on the future. We're always talking about being proactive and how to improve ourselves and our schools. And so on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss 5 ways to improve your teacher in-service days. And I want to let you know that over the past few weeks that many school leaders have purchased Parent Academy to use as part of their teacher in service, and that's what we're talking about today. And Parent Academy contains 2 45-minute webinars that are teacher PDs. There's a 27-page printable notebook and guided notes and discussion questions, and you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/parentacademy to learn more. And the feedback has been really good for schools that have used it in the spring during PD days or faculty meetings. And so I think it could be a real nice addition to your teacher in service. And that, again, is theprivateschoolleader.com/parentacademy. And I want to give you a new resource that I created a few weeks back, and it's called The 4 Worst Things Parents Believe About Your School and How to Change Their Minds. So I don't know about you, but I get really frustrated when parents believe things about my school that aren't true. And it's not only frustrating, but sometimes it feels infuriating and discouraging. But so a lot of the time, parent perception is it's their reality. And so I've created a PDF guide that will talk about 4 really problematic things that parents probably believe about your school. But most importantly, I'm going to teach you how to change their minds. And so you can grab this free guide at theprivateschoolleader.com/believe. That's the 4 worst things parents believe about your school and how to change their minds. And you can get that at theprivateschoolleader.com/believe. Okay, So we're going to jump right into 5 ways to improve your teacher in service days. Number 1, begin with clarity and relevance. Begin with clarity and relevance. So, first of all, with clarity. And many of these things that we will be talking about today on this episode are probably things that you already do, but I'm hopeful that there's some things in here that you're like, I hadn't thought about that, or that's something we used to do. And I just want to kind of shine a spotlight on teacher in service days, and they feel high stakes because they kind of are high stakes. And so that thought and intention that goes into them, and thought and intention goes into the schedule, of course, of those teacher in service days, whether you have 1 or 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever you have. But number 1 is to begin with clarity and relevance. And so with clarity, people like clarity, and we feel psychologically safe when we have clarity. And so publishing that schedule well in advance is pretty important, in my opinion. And I also think that it should be a living, breathing document that has links and everything organized in it. And so, for example, at my most recent school, what we did was it was a Google Sheet, and it was then made to look like a calendar with the day at the top and then the times to the left. And then as you go down, there would be different squares for different activities or different sessions or different meetings or time to work in rooms or what have you. But with it being a Google Sheet, the wonderful thing about that is that you can also insert links. And so let's say that there's a handout or there's a video that goes with one of the trainings. You can link that right there in the Google Sheet. And, we talk to them often. We talk to our teachers often about the faculty handbook or the employee handbook or the student handbook. And those are things that could be linked there or attached to, link as a PDF, and that they can just have easy access to it. So it's sort of like their one-stop shop for the teacher in service days. And so I think that that's pretty important. But then there's other things that we might not think about, but they're thinking about. And again, it's all about clarity. Will lunch be provided on certain days, or is it lunch on your own? What should I wear? That can be just a sentence. Most of our in-services are pretty casual, but it could just be a sentence in your email welcoming them back with the link to the schedule. And then the last thing on clarity before I talk about relevance is stick to the schedule. And here's what I mean by that. Teachers are kind of still in summer mode during in-service days. And what I've seen, and I don't like it, is we have this schedule, and then we wait and we wait and we wait to start the meeting until more and more teachers get into the room. And it's really frustrating for people. It doesn't reward people who come on time, and actually then you get off schedule, and then this thing that you said was 45 minutes, now you're smushing it into 30 minutes. And so I really think that if you have a schedule, you should stick to the schedule and then train your teachers to get there. And if you need to, the first day or two, have the registrar or receptionist or administrative assistant in the main office make an announcement about, now time to go to the cafeteria or whatever the case may be. I just think it's really important to stick to the schedule. So if number 1 is begin with clarity and relevance, that's the clarity part. And then here's the relevance part when it comes to teacher in service. I really think that it's very worthwhile at the beginning of whatever the thing is that you're doing for you to take just a moment and explain why we're doing this. And I'm not saying that it has to be some big, long, philosophical, mission, vision-based thing. I'm saying that when it's time to learn CPR, we remind everyone, okay, just a reminder, the reason why we're doing this is because it helps to keep our kids and we keep each other safe. Or if there's a training on classroom management, well, the reason why we're doing this is because we all know that kids learn better when the environment is calm and predictable and supportive. And so if you think about it, I know, I'll just speak for myself, I like to know, especially when it's something that might not seem relevant to me. I like to know, well, why are we doing this? Now, not everyone's going to agree with the reason why, but relevance, if you view things through the lens of relevance, one thing that might happen is you might eliminate a couple of things from that calendar, from that schedule. But more importantly, the things that make it to the schedule, I think it's worthwhile to take just a moment and kind of get into the habit of a sentence or two about here's why we're doing this, just as a reminder. So the number one on our list of 5 things that we're going to do to improve teacher and service, number 1 is to begin with clarity and relevance. Okay, number 2 is to prioritize their well-being. So prioritize the well-being of the teachers and the staff. I think that it's really nice to have, in whatever the common meeting area is to have snacks and water bottles, to have some breakfast in the morning. And I'm not talking about like the Hampton Inn hot breakfast. I mean, I'm just saying, like, even to have some boxes of donuts, or to have some Costco muffins, or some, whatever the case might be, but to just have some things, and even if it's like protein bars or granola bars, or some frozen yogurt that's sitting in a bowl that has some ice in it. I think it really, especially on the first morning, I think it really does help to just set the tone for, okay, we're here, but we're also going to take care of you. Just picture that versus, and I know most of you already do that, but just picture that versus the message that it sends when you walk into the room and nothing's there. So if you do that, I'm not saying that you need to go nuts and turn this into a 5-star restaurant. I just think that these teachers, they're coming back. We want them to be awake. We want them to be not to be distracted by, a grumbling stomach. And it's also just a nice gesture to show them that they matter. So prioritize their well-being with some snacks and water. And then also, I know that every school is on a different budget. And even at my most recent school, we ran the gamut from when I first started working there in 2012. It was almost every single day that that lunch was provided, and it was a really, really nice lunch. And then over the years, we got to the point where maybe lunch was only provided a couple of the days. But I know you each have a different budget for this. But I think at least one day, preferably the first day, that we can find money to do some sort of lunch. And again, there's a wide range of cost when it comes to these what we would put out there for lunch. But I just think it's important to show that appreciation. Their first day back, they don't have to worry about packing a lunch, that kind of thing. But again, you're going to do what works for you, and I realize it's not just the cost, but it's also the human resources, the manpower to set it up and to clean it up and all the things. But I do think that that's prioritizing their well-being if we can feed them lunch at least some of the time. And then here's a big one. I have 2 more when it comes to prioritizing their well-being. Over the years, when I was running my own school for 21 years, or when I was contributing to the schedule for the 12 years at the Jewish Day School, I really pushed for teachers to have time in their rooms early in the week. And so if you decide, okay, the total number of hours over the course of, let's say it's 4 teacher and service days, you decide that over the course of those 4 days, we're going to schedule 8 total hours of work in their rooms, or maybe 5 total hours, whatever it is. So when you decide what your total number of hours are for working in the rooms, I would front load those in the schedule. Here's why. Because teachers, and everyone's personality is different, but most teachers really want to get their room squared away. And you know that, and I know that the people who want to do that the most, they come in before teacher and service days, and some of them, their rooms are already set and ready to go before the first teacher and service day. Okay, fine. But contractually or whatever, if you have an offer letter or if your teachers are at will employee and it's an expectation and not a contract thing, the bottom line is that their rooms are expected to be ready by that first day of school. And teachers are going to stress out if they haven't, they walk into their room and it's just bare walls and things are in boxes and just whatever the case may be. I just have found that it allows for them to feel more present and to be less distracted and less stressed and less looking at their watch if we can give them some time in their rooms earlier in the schedule of days rather than later. And then the last thing on my list here of prioritizing our teachers is, for example, and you can apply this in other ways. For example, what do you have scheduled after the first person shooter training or after someone coming in and talking about that? So let's say that it's a safety conversation and there's a local police officer or it's your security officer or whoever, and you're talking about run, hide, fight or things of that nature. Well, what's the thing that's scheduled right after that? Sometimes what I've seen is that we have done things where it would be a work in your room time. And then also mindfulness was a part of our school circulatory system. And so we would have one or two teachers who were well versed in mindfulness, and then they would stay behind. And then we would offer, well, anyone that wants to stay behind, we can do a couple of mindfulness practices. Or if you just want to decompress in your room and just acknowledge, hey, that's a lot. We take care of these kids and it's a crazy world out there, so on and so forth. So that's just one example of a way to prioritize their well-being is, do we have something scheduled where they can kind of decompress a little bit from that heavy stuff that we just talked about, or boom, are we right into the next thing and we have a guest speaker standing up there? That doesn't seem too smart to me. So that's number 2, which is to prioritize their well-being. And that brings us to number 3 on our list of 5 ways to improve teacher and service. And number 3 is to turn off the fire hose. So you've heard the phrase drinking from a fire hose. And the idea is that there's so much coming at you that you just can't handle it. And so back in the day when I coached boys varsity basketball, and I'm talking about in the 90s, like from 91 through 99, I remember one year, it was right after winter break, and we only had one practice before our first game after winter break. And because our kids lived kind of all over the place, we had 15 school districts busing to our school, we didn't have practices over break, and some people traveled and family time and this and that. Okay, so we have this one practice on the Monday, and then we have a game on Tuesday. And I remember that I was running them really hard, and I'm thinking, these guys are out of shape. Like some of them probably haven't picked up a basketball and or gone running during winter break. And I'm running them hard. And I remember this kid, Josh, I remember his name. He came over and he said, "Coach, we can't get into shape in one day." And I don't know what I said in the moment, but that impacted me. And I was like, you know what? Josh is right. I can't get them in shape in one day. And we can't get our teachers up to speed with every single thing that they need to know for the school year in a few days. And so it's like, why do we try to jam everything into the in-service schedule? I get it. I've been there, and I've overstuffed in-service schedules in the past. And then after I got a little smarter, I would try to make them a little more reasonable. And it's like, okay, I hear that, Mark, I know, but what can I do to have it not be so jam-packed? We have so much to cover. Okay. First of all, I think you look at the schedule and you ask yourself, what can go? And just last week on the podcast, we talked about the focus funnel. And the very first thing in the focus funnel was eliminate. There's a task. It starts at the top of the funnel, and you ask the question, can I eliminate this task? And so when you look at your schedule, you look at last year's schedule, if you're working on this year's schedule, and it's like, okay, what can go? So eliminate. And maybe none of it can go. But my guess is that maybe there are a couple things that could go. And then you ask this question, what can they do on their own? So, for example, in my early years of being a school leader, I would schedule multiple hours where we would go through the employee handbook and the student handbook, and we wouldn't go through it page by page, word by word, but there were large sections of it where we would go through it, and I would spend time elaborating and explaining and so on and so forth, and basically I was treating them like children. And then what we did at my most recent school for the years, for the last several years of my career, we would just have a Google form, and they would check off, yes, I have read the student handbook. Yes, I have read the employee handbook. Now, did all of them read it? No. The biggest lie in America is to click on and say, yes, I have read the terms and conditions, and I agree. However, we can hold them accountable and responsible for what they've read because they said that they read it. I think also that it is important to differentiate between the handbook as is and the handbook if there are new things or edited or updated policies or procedures in the handbook. So maybe you do a quick run through of some of the new things, but we need to treat them like adults and have them read some things on their own. And can some of these things be revisited at a later date, like a PD day or a faculty meeting? Or is it possible that anaphylactic shock training, that we can have them do that on their own because it's a video training, or fill in the blank? I just want to get you thinking about what are some things that we can eliminate, what are some things that they can do on their own, and what are some things that could be bumped to a later date. And even with that, you're still going to have a full schedule, but maybe it won't feel like they're trying to drink from a fire hose. And that brings us to number 4. And number 4 on our list of 5 ways to improve teacher and service days is to treat them like your students. Number 4 is treat them like your students. So that means brain breaks. That means movement breaks. That means chunking information instead of just handing them a huge binder and expecting that they're not going to fall asleep. That means thinking about what are we doing right after lunch. So I was encouraging you to feed them. And so you feed them and then they eat lunch. Well, what are we doing right after lunch? Do we have a speaker that's going to come in and stand at the podium and be like the sage on a stage and put everybody to sleep? The whole idea behind number 4 is our brains work pretty much the same way as our students' brains. And we wouldn't just talk at the kids for a long period of time. We would break it up. We would chunk it. We would try to keep the meetings, try and keep the lessons shorter. And then, even to just get up and, stretch out for 20 seconds or whatever the case might be. I'm not going to give you all the things that you should do. You know what to do because almost all of us came up through as teachers, and then we also talked to our teachers about how to do this with their students. And so what I'm getting at is to just view this in-service schedule and the actual implementation of it, living it, view it through the lens of how can I do this in a way that increases retention and decreases the fidget and the fidgeting and just the disinterest and the distractions and all that? Then I think the way to do that is to treat them like your students when it comes to how you create that schedule. And then that brings us to number 5. And I actually also then have a bonus tip after that. But number 5 on our list of 5 ways to improve your teacher and service days is to consider using Parent Academy. Now, you've heard me talk about Parent Academy many times before, even earlier in this episode. And Parent Academy is your step-by-step framework that will help you go from feeling stressed and anxious to feeling confident and calm when working with private school parents. And I've taken everything that I've learned over 33 years of working with thousands of private school parents and put it into a digital course. In the first 4 modules, I teach you, as the school leader, everything that you need to know about how you can be less stressed and be more confident, and how to have a great meeting, and why they act the way that they do, and just all of the things, okay? But then I teach your teachers those strategies as well, because Parent Academy contains 2 45-minute webinars that are plug-and-play teacher PDs, and they have a 26-page printable notebook with guided notes and discussion questions. And I know that you've heard me say that before, but I want you to just pause and imagine your upcoming in-service, and there's 60 minutes in the schedule, and it's part 1, building effective relationships with private school parents. And each teacher is there. They come in, let's say it's all in the same room, and you're in the library or the cafeteria or whatever, and each teacher, someone has printed out the 26-page guided notes, and that's handed out. It's in front of them. And then you play that 45-minute video on the screen, and I teach them. And then during that time, they're listening, and they're jotting down in their guided notes and writing notes on the side there. But then after that 45-minute webinar, let's say you take 15 minutes or more. You could take 15 minutes and break them into groups, and then there's discussion questions right there for them to internalize the information that they just learned. That's 60 minutes in your schedule, and I know that I've just been talking about, trying to take things out of your schedule, but sometimes you're looking for meaningful PD, and I know that schools that maybe are on a smaller budget, it's really hard to figure out what that looks like. Well, this is something that is, like I said, plug and play. You can refer back to it during the school year and say, remember when we learned ... and it'll increase the cooperation level and the skill level and the overall effectiveness level of the partnership between your teachers and your parents. And so if you want to consider Parent Academy as part of your teacher in service, you can check that out. Everything you need to know is there at theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. And several private school leaders in the spring use this as on a PD day in February or March, or a faculty meeting, and the feedback has been really, really good. And there's about 15 schools that have purchased Parent Academy already, and it's going to be part of their in-service coming up here in the next several weeks. And so again, that's theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. And then I promised you a bonus tip. I gave you the 5 ways to improve your teacher in-service days, but here's a bonus tip. I'm going to include in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 142, I'm going to include a step-by-step guide for using Title II funds. See, most of my clients use Title II funds, and quite honestly, most of the leaders who've purchased Parent Academy have used Title II funds to pay for that. But I also have some clients and some people that I email with and podcast listeners that don't really use Title II funds because it just seems like one more thing, or it seems like it's too complicated. And trust me, I know that there's a wide range of how complicated it is with each individual school district that I've worked with all over the country. But the bottom line is that this is money that exists from, the Department of Education, and it's there for, Title II is for the professional development of teachers and administrators. And that's you. You can use money that is sitting there to grow yourself. And whether that's for Thrive Academy or for coaching, or in this case for Parent Academy for in-service for your teachers, it's there. And I want to demystify that for you. And so if you go to the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 142, I've created a step-by-step guide for you on how to use Title II funds. So let's review and hit on the big takeaways from today's episode. The 5 ways to improve your teacher and service days. Number 1, begin with clarity and relevance. Get that schedule out well in advance, and then relevance is, this is why we're doing this. Number 2, prioritize their well-being. So that could be snacks and water or lunch, but also it could be, what are we doing after we train in run, hide, fight, for example. Number 3, turn off the fire hose. What can we eliminate? Number 4 is treat them like your students, and that's brain breaks and chunking, and are we doing something kind of boring right after lunch that's going to put them to sleep? Number 5 is consider using Parent Academy. And then it's not number 6, it's just a bonus tip, is I've got a step-by-step guide for you for using Title II funds. And your call to action for today's episode is to take 30 minutes this week to review your plan for teacher and service, and then ask yourself if you need to change or add or take away anything from your plan, from your schedule. So let's wrap it up. I would love to hear from you. My email address is mark.o.minkus@gmail.com. And just shoot me an email to let me know something from the podcast that you've used that's been helpful. Or maybe what was your biggest pain point from this past school year? And maybe that can turn into an upcoming episode. And if you would please write a review and rate the podcast wherever you listen to it, that helps the algorithm push this out as suggested content for private school leaders all over the world. And we're in 66 countries in all 50 states. And just to get this free content out there, that's one way to do it. And so thank you for that. I'm on Instagram at The Private School Leader. And most importantly, if you get value from this podcast, please share it with another school leader that you know or a rising leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I just want to say how much I appreciate you and all of your hard work that you're doing at your school. Thank you so much for taking some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.